Hi there and welcome back. Following on from a recent YouTube video I did looking at the effects of sunlight and shade on ICM images and how to combat them while you're out there actually on site and thinking about what to do for post-processing. I thought I'd just run you through the post-processing of a couple of these images, and I've just got three on screen here. I will enlarge each of them in a minute, but you've got them ranging from pretty flat light on the top left, where then on the right you've got a little bit more sun coming out, and then the bottom one was pretty much full sun coming out. And if you watch my other video, you'll hear me discuss how sun can be wonderful, but it can be a really tricky thing to manage in ICM images because of the contrasts and the fact that when you're using a slightly slower shutter speed, you will then be looking at blowing a lot of highlights unless you're very careful. So these are the three I've just chosen. This one was without any sunlight. There's still light and you can see it coming through from the canopy down here, lighting up, which I think is lovely. Without that, it may not be a very interesting image, but for me, it gives a bit of depth and it's really nice. Then we've got the next one, and I quite like the movement of this. I've selected these three out of a selection already, and you've got a little bit more contrast going on with the light, a little bit more light on the trees, running through to this one where it's sort of full on sunlight, and you can see that I've been sort of challenged by the highlights running through here. Just so you know, these were all shot at f16, a third of a second, ISO 100 on my 50mm lens. I don't often use my 50mm lens for ICM photography just because it only goes to f16, and quite often that's not high enough for me to be able to block out enough light, but I do love using that. So I am going to start with the flat light one. Now I'm going to just sort of run through these as I'm doing this. Now, one of the first things I do is I'm not lazy, but I'm always looking to make it as simple for myself as possible. So if I spot things on the edge, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put the highlights. I've already put the highlights down on this one, as I was doing in the previous video. Without the highlights, I've got the thing to show me that I've got it highlighted on the histogram here, so I can see when they're bit blown. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull back the highlights. And at this point, I'm going to know whether it's salvageable, because if you pull out the highlights and it's still bright red flashing, you know you're going to struggle to save that image or do anything. So I've got a bit of light going on here, and I've got quite a chunk of light going on the outside. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see whether a 6x4 or a 16:9 crop works best for this image, because it will help me when I'm doing my post-processing further, and they do tend to be the two sets I use. So we're going to just have a go at the 4x6 first. And if you've got if you select your crop tool and then double click L, it makes everything go black around it, so you can really concentrate on what the image. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull that in. So immediately our eye is now not heading out here, but it's heading out here instead. So what I want to do is see whether if I crop it, it affects the feel of the image more than more than the distraction I'm trying to get away. And see, I really quite like this line coming through. So if we crop that bit out, do we lose it? Yeah, I think probably we can just about get away with that, because it's now a nice balance between. I might just pull this in very slightly so that this tree and this tree sit the same distance from the edge. Let's just have a little play. There we go. I'm quite happy with that as a 16:9. Sorry, a 6x4. So I'm now going to show you the same with the other ones, and we won't go 16:9 with the other ones. I think if you go 16:9, you'll probably end up losing the essence of the height of the trees. And they weren't very big trees, these, so I don't want to lose everything. Now, to me, this is still quite distracting, but I'm going to address that in a minute. The first thing I'm going to do, and I have a basic idea of what I'm going to do, but I don't have it set in stone. But normally the first thing I will do after making sure I can save the highlights is just have a play with the blacks. And I don't mean a lot. Quite often I pull them back too far, and then I'll push them back to where I feel is a little bit more comfortable. So sort of around the mid-20s. And the whites, I'm not sure I need to push the whites too much here, because I then start bringing the highlights back here. So at this moment, I am just going to make you a virtual copy so that we can compare the two. And if I put the virtual copy back to what it was originally, we'll be able to compare the two when I've finished editing. So here we go. I quite like this, but this area up here is still a little bit distracting, and it's kind of where my eye's going after it lands on here. So I'm going to go through into Photoshop, and I don't use Photoshop an awful lot except for my layering work and for getting rid of distractions. So I'm going to go edit in Adobe Photoshop, and I'm working on the classic version, so I don't know how that differs from the CC version. So let's go and see. Here we go. Sometimes my computer's a little bit slow. Right, let's have a look. Now, I don't necessarily want to clone out, but I do want to reduce the impact that they're having. So I'm going to go and use the clone tool, but I'm going to have it on a sort of 36% to start with and just see what happens. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is, see, these ones don't worry me too much, these sort of odd ones, but this block does. So what I'm going to do is just pick on my clone tool somewhere that's sort of the same color and just run very gently over these white areas here. Now, it's not to say that this is correct. This is just something, this is the first time I've edited this, so I haven't done this before. You're seeing it. So this is a kind of seeing me in the in real time editing this image. So I may yet come back and change things. Don't be set in stone that what I've done at this point is what is going to be there at the end. Down the edge, I'm just seeing it's a little bit light, so I'm just going to take that off. And you'll see I've just caught a bit that's too dark for this area, so I'm just going to pick up a bit that's greener to match that, and I'm just going to go back over that. And because I've got it on 36%, every time I go over it a second time, if I unclick my mouse and do another layer over the top, you then go over it like you've then got a second, it's a bit like putting a paintbrush on, you've kind of gone over it a second time. So that's without question taken away a lot of the sort of my eye being dragged. And I'm just going here, I'm just going to do a few little bits here. Let's go right back to sort of 14%. I just want to take the light, the really bright off there. I don't want to get rid of it completely though. I mean, it's just literally taking it off. And same here, I just want that to have a little bit so that my eye is not distracted. I'm just looking everywhere that my eye is being dragged away from this middle area. Again, that's quite bright, not so bright that I want to clone it though. So I'm literally working at 14% here. So now all I'm left with, as far as I'm concerned, is this white area up here. So I am going to now just up the opacity, and I'm just going to see whether maybe cloning some of this. Actually, I'm going to go to 100% to clone to see if this makes an effect. So for example, up here, I am going to, maybe not 100%. Like I said, I'm doing this on the hoof. You're doing it with me right now. Just going to see, we may yet, let's go back and get rid of that because that was completely wrong. I need to go downwards with my movement. So if we're starting at the top, let's not end up with a line. There we go. I'm going to take the opacity down a little bit and just get rid of that in the corner there. Same with those. Okay, right. Now this one's bugging me, but it's quite small, so I just want to get rid of that one there. Again, I might actually want to get rid of that completely. So there we go. Any more that are bugging me? Maybe these little three a little bit distracting. You have to make a choice about whether you still want to see them or whether you want to get rid of these completely. So I'm just getting rid of these, and this one on the edge is just a little bit distracting. The more I look and the more I keep looking and the more I think, oh, actually, that's pulling my eye. I do like some though, because then it adds a little bit of contrast to the image. So it's not that I want to get rid of them all, because then you would end up with a completely flat image. And we're starting with a much flatter image here than we did before anyway. I'm just going to run over these once more with a low opacity, quite big brush, because I think they could take a little bit more bringing down. So let's just do a bigger brush. We're on 15%. just clicked off it again. Okay, I'm reasonably happy. There's just a little bit there. Just get rid of that. There we go. Possibly just there. Right, and then just going to go and get rid of that. I tend to keep an eye on anything along edges, because if your eye is dragged to the edges of somewhere, it's better to try. There we go. Right, I think I'm quite happy with that now. If you start cloning out too much, you end up it looks sort of messy. So I'm going to put save, and if you've come directly through from Lightroom and you've edited a copy, then it will go back in and it will appear in your Lightroom catalogue next to the original. So that's the one. That was our starting one so far. That was what I took through into Lightroom. So that was the crop version. And then this is what I've just brought back here from Lightroom. Now, because I've taken the whites off, we've lost a little bit of the contrast now. So now I feel I can just play a little bit with the contrast again. So I'm just going to push the blacks a little bit. And this top area, I could do a little bit with that. So I use this tool, the gradient tool, and it tends to be set on whatever you were using it before. So just be aware that if you then pull down on that, that's what it's going to do. I'm going to go darken for the first one, but then I'm going to play with what it is. And I'm only going to bring it down for the top because I'm just finding maybe the top is a little bit mushy now. So I'm just going to push a little bit on the dehaze. There we go. Little bit on the blacks. Little bit on the whites. Don't want to pull back all the work that I've just been doing. Possibly a little bit contrast. There we go. And yeah, for me, the only thing, I'm not quite sure whether I like this or not, to be honest. I'm not sure whether it's distracting or whether it just adds a little bit of, sorry, it adds a little bit of something interest. I wonder, what do we think? Yeah, maybe we'll have a look at that on another image that I have a go at in a minute. Anyway, I'd like to, that's kind of, I'm going to go from the original. I'm going to just show you these next to each other. So that's your original straight out of camera image. And that is my worked Photoshop image. And then that's something I would sort of share. I'm still not sure about this. Next time you see it, it may be taken out. So that is your image that didn't have any light. So I've worked on getting rid of the distractions and then pushing a little bit of contrast into the image. Okay, so the next one I had was this one. The other one I had was this one. Let's go all the way to the one with the most sunlight in and just see how that looks. So let's have a look. Okay, come back. Both exactly the same. Okay, so again, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just pull back the highlights, which I've already done, and we're just going to put a crop on it. Just get rid of that top left a little bit. This time we've got quite a big block of light there. I'm wondering whether to leave it this time and just see what happens, see what we can do with that. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to pull back the exposure very slightly and just see. Okay, we've still got all the contrast, but we haven't got quite so much brightness. And I'm just going to pull back the blacks a little bit. And let's have a look. Yeah, I think we're going to go over into Photoshop from this one. Edit in, Photoshop. There we go. So this time we've got quite a lot of brightness here to deal with, and I've left this area in here so we can sort of have a look at it. By the way, if you ever end up using your clone tool and find you've got a cross here instead of a circle, it may be that your caps lock is on, and if you press the caps lock key, you get your clone tool back. So, and here also, because it's brighter, you can see like there's a double effect of this, which is a bit more distracting on this one. So again, the same with this one. We're going to just maybe a little bit more than 15%. I'm just going to go over this very quickly. Here, what you do need to be just a little bit careful of is that you will soften your edges if you're just going over at a lower percentage. If you go over 100%, you can keep the sharpness of it, but then obviously you lose the detail. So I'm just going to see whether we can get away with just doing, I've just gone too far down there. So I'm just going to put a little bit of light, so I can bring a bit of lightness back into that there. Actually, what we'll do is we'll just go back a step there. There we go. So I'm just wondering whether we try on this one cloning 100% just to see what this looks like. I don't want to make it look like it's, if you're ever going to clone, the idea is that nobody knows you've cloned, obviously. So here we're just at 56%. And if you double click it a couple of times rather than just running over it, you can end up with a bit of a sharper edge if it's not quite 100%. There we go. I think I need to put a bit more. Okay, now you can quite locally, this is working quite nicely. Again, you need to be careful that it doesn't look like a repetition. There we go, quite liking that. And I'm just going to pull off the edge there because we left that on in this one. And then I mentioned here that I thought we'd take this away this time. So very careful here so it doesn't look, so you've got sort of a, take the opacity down here. Let's bring some of that across here so it doesn't look the same, too samey. It's quite soft, you wouldn't notice there. Now I'm just going to put some of this at a higher opacity in, just to add some detail. I feel I've lost a lot of detail there. Whoop. Doesn't look so bad. Pop that in there. There we go. So this area is just the area that's looking quite bright at the moment, but I'm going to see whether I can pull, let's just take a little bit over that one. Whoop. Didn't change the opacity. Let's take a little bit of the bright area in there. I find the back key quite useful sometimes. There we go. Right, I'm going to take that back into Lightroom. Again, let's just knock off those. And I quite like these areas. I can deal with these areas in Lightroom quite happily. So let's save that back into Lightroom and look at what we've done so far. Okay, so this time we're working with a photo that was very bright, but you can see it's a lovely contrast, but you can see all this was very distracting. Found that distracting, this area of light we hadn't managed to knock back. So here we've done this, and I think if you hadn't seen the original, you might not know that I'd done too much cloning in here if you didn't know straight away. I'm going to knock back the blacks a little bit. I'm going to push the black, sorry, a little bit, and the contrast a little bit. And just pull back, because we've gone out, we come back in, I can pull back the highlights again. And there's nothing blown. And that is so vibrant. I think it's lovely. Could possibly just put a very small vignette around it. When you're doing vignetting, being very careful. If you squint with your eyes and you can see it at all, then you've gone too far. I mean, that's like -6%. That's nothing. So we're just going to have a look at that one versus, let's see if I can find the one I was doing before. Is it that one? Let's find the one I've just done. There we go, that one. Okay, so you've got now here, you get to see the 4 versions of this image that we've got here. Okay, so on the top you've got the edited version versus the unedited version of the one without sunlight. And I'm not sure about this now, going back into it. I think maybe I'd need to clone this, but you can see that there's enough contrast in here. I'd be quite happy with this. If the sun hadn't come out, I'd be more than happy with it. Do this for you so you can see it better. This was the original image, and now this was the one with the sun having come out, and then this was the original. So you can see there's quite a lot of work gone into getting rid of too many distractions and really kind of bringing these tree trunks to the fore and sort of making them the important factors. And if we just get rid of these unedited versions, and we can see these, you can see the difference the sun makes now. The trees, I mean, it's lovely. I prefer now, definitely, without question, I prefer the image with the sun in it. I think it's got a little bit more, it's got a lot more vibrance, a lot more energy. And to be honest, that's what I felt when I was in the woodland. I felt the sun coming down. I was on holiday, I was happy. I loved all these little trees and all the different greens, and I loved how the sun was coming across into the woodlands. And I loved sort of how it sort of separated all these trees and the trunks really stuck out from everything. There's also a little bit more detail in some of the grass here. This one's sort of almost a sort of pastel chalky look, whereas this one's got a little bit more detail. So I hope you enjoyed that little run through. Excuse for the crash in the middle, that was my microphone falling over. But I hope that helped, or you found that useful or interesting on the sort of processing. As I said, I did it in real time. I hadn't done it before, so I didn't know quite what I was doing, which is why I say when I come back to this, I'm not 100% sure that I wouldn't sort of go and clone that or play with it a little bit more. But it gives you an idea of how to what you're looking for when you're looking for distractions, because quite often when you take the image and you're attached to the image, you won't see these things, and you have to be super critical. If you look at someone else's image, it's really easy to pick up things that are wrong with it if you're kind of looking at it with a critical idea. But your own images, it's so hard to be super critical of them unless that is the mindset that you go into when you start editing. Always look for distractions around the edge, because they're the first ones that you're going to be pulled by. Then look for things in the image that you don't actually want the viewer to be looking at. Like, I really want the viewer to be looking at the trees. I don't want the viewer to be looking beyond the trees and out into the field beyond. That's not, I want them to stay here in the moment in the trees, which is why I darkened down in both of these images the areas between the trees. Anyway, I hope that really helped. Again, once again, do register to join the YouTube channel so that you can get regular updates, and do give me a comment or a like if you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next time.